What's up, everybody? My name is McGregor Thomas, and today we will be discussing major or mild neurocognitive disorders due to HIV infection, beginning with the symptomology behind that.
General symptoms of HIV start in the first stage, and that includes flu-like symptoms such as swollen lymph nodes, sore throats, the cough, things like that. And this usually lasts anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. After these 2 to 6 weeks, the virus goes into stage 2, which can last 8 years or even longer, and that's prolonged by modern combined antiretroviral treatments. But once the virus progresses into stage 3, that's where a lot of the neurocognitive disorders are present, and often this leads into diagnosis of AIDS. Another symptom of HIV is depression, which is actually the most common comorbidity accompanying HIV, and that's caused by damage to the amygdala and hippocampus, as long as faulty serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine receptors. Another symptom is learning and memory impairments, and it's been noted that 40 to 60% of the HIV population with neurocognitive impairments suffer from deficits in episodic memory, and 30 to 40% of the HIV population have difficulty in encoding and retrieving memories as well. It's also been found that perspective memory has been impaired in patients, but that's usually in major diagnosis. Speaking of major neurocognitive symptoms, when it gets to that point, motor skills are often impaired, such as bradykinesia, which is slowed movement, bradyphrenia, which is slowed or impaired information processing, and hypomania, which is loss of control of facial muscles. Something else that is impaired are executive functions. That's the inability to solve or complete complex problems. And this actually stems from dysfunction in the frontal cortex, basal ganglia, and other posterior prefrontal cortex. And this is actually, when this is observed, this is evidence of major neurocognitive disorder. And lastly, speech and language, which is also in extreme or major cases, but surprisingly also present in HIV infection in children. Also listed are ataxic dysrhythmia, reduced fluency, out-of-place interruptions. These all relate to faulty semantic memory stores and executive functioning. But now let's get into physiology. Behind the infection of HIV are CD4 T cells. The HIV virus targets, infects, and destroys CD4 T cells, which really are the backbone of our immune system. When this happens, infective cells travel from the bloodstream to tissues all across the body. But modern antiretroviral medication inhibits the progress of the disease's infection and allows the body to produce more CD4 cells. CD4 nadir, that is a patient's lowest historical count of CD4 cells, and low CD4 nadir cell count directly correlates with an increase in neurocognitive disabilities. Another thing that is affected by HIV is the central nervous system, and actually the brain is one of the most infected organs in the body by HIV. Neuroinflammation is the largest contributor to neurocognitive disorder due to HIV infection, and that's because HIV produces a protein that causes inflammation in brain gray matter. Another thing that HIV does is it also causes neural atrophy in the basal ganglia and frontal lobes. Loss of white matter in these areas has been linked to impaired executive and motor functions. An interesting thing that I found was an increase in cerebrospinal fluid quinolinic acid. So this quinolinic acid is present in the body as a response to central nervous system immune infections, but In the case of HIV, it acts as an excitotoxin, which kills neurons by excessive excitation via neurotransmitters. In this case, it is an NMDA agonist. So, cholinergic acid levels, as I just said, were increased in the HIV infections and are actually lead to some pretty nasty stuff. What's interesting is the basal ganglia and the hippocampus have an increased amount of NMDA receptors, and so that's why most of the executive functions are also impaired. Now, when we get into the treatment of HIV, often antiretroviral medications are used, and there's several different types that are used in modern medicine, and all of these are usually used in combination to confuse the HIV virus. The first type, nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor, blocks RNA polymerase needed for replication. Non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor inhibits the transfer of information inside a host cell's DNA. Protease inhibitors keeps the HIV virus in an immature state, preventing it from proliferating and infecting new cells. Integrase strand transfer inhibitors, these inhibit the enzyme integrase, which allows the viral RNA to be integrated into a host cell's DNA. And lastly, the CCR5 antagonist blocks receptors of CCR5, which are the site on a host cell where viral RNA penetrates the host cell. And like I just said, combined antiretroviral therapy is the most commonly used out of all of these, which is just a combination. But earlier I discussed depression as one of the symptoms of HIV infection, and this is actually a new form of treatment that's being researched right now and waiting FDA approval, and that is vagus nerve stimulation. Now, the vagus nerve is a parasympathetic system that restores homeostatic properties following neurological trauma or neuroinflammation, and scientists are hoping that through this stimulation of this nerve, they'll be able to compensate for the chronic inflammation brought on by HIV infection. And since the amygdala and hippocampus are the main sites where that cause depression, if the chronic inflammation is dealt with at these sites, then that might be able to alleviate some of the depressive symptoms.